indoctrination, manipulation and militarization. This was the Nazis' way to make sure their ideology solidified in everyone's mind. In this video, we will deal with everything you have to know about this topic. Welcome to 15 Points History. The Hitler Youth was the junior and youth organization of the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or NSDAP. It was named after Adolf Hitler in 1926, and under the dictatorship of National Socialism in Germany from 1933, it became the only state-recognized youth association. The Hitler Youth was organized by gender and age groups. Boys aged 10 to 14 were in the German Young People, boys from 14 to 18 in the Hitler Youth, girls aged 10 to 14 in the Young Girls Association, and girls from 14 to 18 in the League of German Girls. The Hitler Youth was founded in 1926 as a youth movement of the NSDAP. After taking power in 1933, all other youth associations were banned by laws, making the Hitler Youth the only officially recognized youth organization in Germany. Membership in the Hitler Youth was made legally mandatory in 1939. All young people between the ages of 10 and 18 were required to join the Hitler Youth sub-organization designated to them. This is also defined in the law on the Hitler Youth that states the following. The entire German youth is to be educated physically, mentally and morally in the Hitler Youth in the spirit of National Socialism to serve the people and the national community. This law shows how strictly the Nazis enforced their plans with regard to the youth. Exceptions were only made for sick and disabled children. Jews were forbidden to join as well. The Hitler Youth was the center of physical and ideological training. It included racist and social Darwinist indoctrination, as well as joint hikes or marches and physical exercises outdoors. These were intended to toughen up boys from the age of 10 and prepare them for war service in the long term.
The Hitler Youth didn't come to existence out of nowhere. It was based on the Wandervogel movement, a youth organization that dealt with nature and self-determination back in the times of the Weimar Republic. This already existing youth organization that should help children to escape from their restricted and authoritarian households or teachers by making fun trips and connecting people the same age was perfect for the NSDAP to build up their own manipulating version of a youth organization on it. What also played into the favor of the Nazis were the tensions between young and old in society. During the Weimar Republic and even before, the young people felt helpless and lost due to economic and political crisis. There was the First World War, then a lot of street fights due to political conflicts and a huge inflation, as well as no jobs. Young people felt like they were held back from the older generation and used by them, and that's where the Nazis saw their chance. With the Hitler Youth and the League of German Girls, the Nazis gave the young people a new perspective, a community where everyone is equal and can achieve everything they want without being dependent on the older generation. Everyone wore the same uniforms, no matter if you were rich or poor, and there were no grown-up supervisors. Instead, the older members cared for the younger ones. The motto was, "The young lead the young." An equal and fair youth institution that helps you to be independent from the older generation and self-determined. At least that's what the young people thought they'll get when they joined the Hitler Youth or the League of German Girls. But in real life, it never was the goal of the Nazis to raise independent and self-determined people that could possibly question the Nazis and rise up against them. The Hitler Youth existed to indoctrinate Nazi beliefs and values, as well as raising boys to be cold and loyal soldiers that only obey the Führer and no one else. It was important for the Nazis to indoctrinate these things as early as possible, as young people don't question what they get told, and it's difficult to get rid of beliefs and ideas that you learn from a young age on. The most important beliefs and values that got indoctrinated from a young age was the principle of Volksgemeinschaft, the idea of races based on social Darwinism, and the complete obedience to the Führer, the Führerprinzip. The principle of Volksgemeinschaft meant that there should be no individuality and everything an individual does is only in the favor of the community. One has no value, only the community has. This is contradicting to the promises of the Nazis, as the Nazis used the teenagers' urge to be independent from their parents. The family was thought of as a burden because family bonds are often very strong and parents could possibly influence their children. The young people learned to be loyal to the state and subordinate themselves to the community. In the community where everyone should be equal and have the same chances to achieve what they want. Well, that wasn't the case. If you just look at how society is structured, you witness a huge gap between the state and the people, between the Volksgemeinschaft and the Führer. But the community did not really care that they were ruled by only one man who had all the power. In their view, he was a hero. The man that gave the young a perspective and seemingly independence. But even though Hitler was popular, the idea of a Führer that needs to lead the people and the necessity of it was indoctrinated into the minds of young people, so that the absolute loyalty, even after Hitler's death, was granted. The third idea that was implemented in the young people's heads was the idea of different races and especially a superior race. The Aryan race. Based on social Darwinism, the Nazis had the idea that the Aryan race was superior to all other races and has the right to harm and control any other race as it likes. They have the duty to keep the Aryan race pure and spread it over Europe and especially the East. This idea of a superior race didn't only create a feeling of specialty and unity among the young people, but also made sure the future soldiers did not hesitate when killing enemies and didn't question any orders given to them, as any form of cruelty and brutality could be justified by the idea of races. That this indoctrination worked can be clearly seen when it comes to the war of extermination, where the Russians got treated with no glimpse of humanity and got annihilated for the sake of the Aryan race. And also of course in the persecution of Jews, where there was little to no resistance against the mass murder and the cruel circumstances in concentration camps. And of course the Nazis didn't tell the young people straight up that they were only tools to fulfill Hitler's goals and manipulated so they can kill with no hesitation and be loyal to the Reich. The Nazis had methods to subliminally indoctrinate their ideas. Every Wednesday, the young people were forced to hear radio broadcasts specially designed for young people that step by step implemented the Nazi ideas in the minds of the listeners. Of course, all the cruel plans of the Nazis were held back from the young people as they might have scared them. Every action was glorified and belittled. But members of the Hitler Youth weren't only mentally prepared for the war and how to be Nazis, but also physically. Boys in the Hitler Youth got trained to be soldiers from an early age on, by letting them take part in paramilitary exercises and shooting practice. In general, physical exercise was in the focus of the Hitler Youth. By making military practice as fun as possible and training the young boys' bodies, the members of the Hitler Youth had the perfect physical requirements to be soldiers and participate later on in the war. To show how the NS regime wanted the youth to be, here's a short quote of Hitler that says, "The youth should be as nimble as greyhounds, as tough as leather, and as hard as steel." So in short, the ideas of being absolute loyal to the Führer and not to anybody else, as well as seeing the enemy as a subordinate race that isn't worth anything, formed the perfect mantle for young people in the NS regime. This mantle, combined with all the military practice, made the boys back then perfect and fearsome soldiers. This also shows for how long Hitler planned his war and used the young generation to his favor.
For boys, a militarized training was emphasized, preparing them as soldiers and defenders of the state through intensive training in combat techniques, weapon handling, and military discipline. The League of German Girls, however, focused on different things. Firstly, the Association of Young Girls for girls aged 10 to 14 functioned as an introduction to basic physical and domestic training. The League of German Girls was for girls aged 14 to 17. They got trained to become more focused on their roles as mothers and housewives, with increased emphasis on home economics, child rearing, and domestic skills. Lastly, the Faith and Beauty Society for young women aged 17 to 21 aimed at refining their education in the arts, physical fitness, and social functions, preparing them to be the epitome of Nazi womanhood. They had the opportunity to experience a sense of belonging and being part of the people's community, often escaping the strict rules of their parental home. Over time, however, the perception of the Hitler Youth changed considerably. This was mainly due to restrictions on personal freedom and ever-increasing obligations. The number of duties and requirements increased, such as compulsory labor service, which was integrated into young people's everyday lives and forced them to perform tasks that were often perceived as burdensome or annoying. For example, young people had to take part in paramilitary exercises and help collect raw materials such as metal and clothing at weekends and after school. This led to a change in the attitude and happiness of young people. Resistance began. Some avoided the Hitler Youth and its ideology, others avoided giving the Hitler salute in public or ignoring National Socialist propaganda. Some young people tried to escape the activities of the Hitler Youth by calling in sick or finding other excuses not to take part. Others formed actual resistance groups, like the Edelweiss Pirates. The Edelweiss Pirates were a loosely organized youth movement that formed in 1939. They consisted of various subgroups that protested locally, including those from Cologne-Radartal, Düsseldorf and Leipzig. These were mainly teenage boys and girls who didn't support the Nazi ideology. They often came from the working class. These groups carried out numerous actions to counter the Nazi regime, such as distributing flyers, getting into fights with the Hitler Youth, and housing persecuted people, including Jews. One well-known subgroup was the Edelweiss group led by Gertrud Kuhlem, which attracted attention with flyers such as "Wheels rolling for victory, Hitler heads after war." They also wrote slogans on house walls and railroads to spread their messages. From the point of view of the National Socialists, the Edelweiss Pirates were considered anti-state and dangerous. The regime took actions against them, such as the arrest and execution of several members in November 1944, including members who were only 16 years old then. They were publicly hanged. This was used as a sign to prevent further acts of resistance. The White Rose is probably the most famous resistance group, which mainly consisted of students from the University of Munich. The group was founded in 1942 and campaigned for enlightenment and resistance against the Nazi regime. Its best-known members included Sophie Scholl, Hans Scholl, Alexander Schmorell, Willi Graf and Christoph Probst. The White Rose secretly distributed political flyers denouncing the atrocities and crimes of the Nazi regime and calling for passive resistance. The groups mainly operated in Munich, but also distributed its writings in other cities. In February 1943, Sophie and Hans Scholl were discovered distributing flyers at the University of Munich and later on arrested. After a short show trial, they were executed together with Christoph Probst on February 22, 1943. The execution was seen as an act of deterrence, but could not erase the ideals and the memory of their courageous resistance. The Swing Youth consisted of young people who set themselves apart from the Nazi regime through their passion for swing music and their admiration for American culture. They rejected National Socialist ideology and found a form to protest through self-determination in the music and lifestyle of the American swing scene. The members lived a life that contradicted the moral and cultural norms of the Nazi regime. They listened to forbidden music, organized secret dance events, sometimes with over 500 members, and dressed in the style of the American youth culture. The group grew rapidly, especially in large cities such as Hamburg. It is estimated that they had several thousands of members. The Nazis regarded the Swing Youth as decadent and dangerous, calling it Negro music or monkey dances. Public performances and gatherings of the Swing Youth were banned, and many of its members were persecuted, beaten up, imprisoned, and sent to labor camps. These resistance groups represent the courageous commitment of young people against the totalitarian regime of the National Socialists and their inhuman policies. Their actions and sacrifices still have significant historical and moral relevance today. The Hitler Youth was a key tool for the Nazi regime to indoctrinate the German youth. It was structured to influence children from a young age, with boys receiving military training and girls being prepared for their roles as mothers and housewives. The organization emphasized Nazi ideology, physical fitness, and loyalty to the state. Boys in the Hitler Youth were especially trained in combat techniques, weapon handling, and military discipline. Girls in the League of German Girls learned different aspects of domestic skills and Nazi principles. Despite its initial appeal, the Hitler Youth's restrictive nature and increasing obligations led to growing dissatisfaction among the youth. This dissatisfaction gave rise to resistance groups. The Edelweiss Pirates distributed flyers and sheltered persecuted individuals. The White Rose, primarily university students, called for passive resistance against the regime. The Swing Youth embraced American swing music and culture, defying Nazi norms through secret dance events. If you liked this video, feel free to check out our channel, to leave a like and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. Thank you and see you later, here with 15 points history.